Hello, guys. Welcome back to a new episode of Teen Talks. Today we have Kabir Sahni, a high-achieving senior from India. His interests span the spectrum from debating on the world stage to tackle educational challenges with innovative situations. A passionate advocate, he has represented India at World School Debating Leagues, reaching the semi-final stage. Furthermore, being a mathwit, Kabir has gathered recognition in prestigious competitions like Caltech Math Meet and Stanford and Berkeley Math Tournament. Most importantly, he is the founder of Mathematics EnVisionEd, the world's first mathematical senior energy that aims to uplift blind students in math. Thank you, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Miguel. That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
So can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm currently a high school senior residing in India. I'm planning to major in math. I've been a debater even before my freshman year, I've represented India in the World Schools Debating League in Paris WSCC. We have won even the World Scholars Cup. Apart from that, of course, I like math and math research and working in the domain of education. So my research journey, it started with writing a paper in the field of education in my freshman year. Then I wrote another paper. And then after that, I entered research in the field of math per se. But I've been doing math competitions from quite a long time. I've competed in Olympiads and Caltech Math Meet, the Stanford Math Tournament, and of course, the Berkeley Math Tournament as well, and we have won there as well. So yeah, that's pretty much about me.
Very nice. So the project that you have is like truly amazing and remarkable. And can you describe how you started your project and what inspired you?
Sure. My grandfather's real brother, who is my bade nanu, that's what we call them in India. Due to diabetes, he has an eyesight problem. So, as he's a businessman, he often needs to do the calculations. So that's what particularly triggered my interest. But I'd say that my what really has formed this initiative, the thinking behind it, comes from all of my interests. So essentially, that's what piqued my interest. However, post that, because of my passion for research, I researched upon it. Now, most of the students, I feel that this has been quite an overlooked area because most of the students they want a bigger market to target. However, when it comes to blind students, the market is relatively smaller. However, now the question is that does it necessarily mean that if the market is smaller, do should people not work on that issue? That's essentially not the case. Something that I've learned from debating, that even if the people being impacted, the number of people are smaller, they are still more vulnerable, right? That's essentially why minorities are given rights. So yeah, that was my thinking, and that's essentially what formed this initiative. So this multidisciplinary thinking ultimately gave rise to this multidisciplinary initiative, wherein we are using technology, volunteers, and art to uplift blind students in math.
Wow, that's amazing. And do you have any challenges developing the project?
Yeah, so there were a couple of them, quite frankly. First of all, when it comes to other things, so if you see, one of the areas that blind students are pretty weak in is geometry. That's essentially because they can't see the figures, right? So we thought that if we go to underprivileged student and we organize an art activity, so we are making 3D shapes like cubes, cuboids, and cylinders. They are making those shapes through waste paper, and then we are circulating those figures to blind schools. That essentially, finding the appropriate material for those figures was difficult because the material had to be sturdy, it had to be sustainable, and it had to be very easily available. So we started with basic paper and newspaper. However, realizing that it ultimately wasn't sustainable, we switched to cardboard, right? The cardboard that's used in uh Amazon boxes. And then, of course, we have used toilet paper rolls, foil paper rolls as well. So yeah, I mean that was a challenge. And when it comes to technologies, I mean, we have developed the world's first AI chatbot that's specifically tailored for blind students. So essentially, I mean, it kind of automatically generates questions
Mm.
tailored to the needs of blind students. So making that was, I mean, certainly a challenge because although I'm not really an AI guy, I know coding, I know, so I made the first prototype, but ultimately getting people and then making it, that was a challenge that I certainly faced.
And which type of math do you teach the blind students?
Essentially, so okay, now there are two aspects to it. First
Mm.
of all, in some places, for example, even high school math isn't taught properly. So the recordings, which is to say, one of our initiatives that we are doing is creating recordings for blind students. So that typically stems from the high school curriculum. However, currently we are designing another initiative called the Blind Math Circle. So it'll be a math circle specifically for blind students. Over there, it'll be more of competitive math. So math that isn't typically taught in high school, but
Mm.
rather to foster mathematical thinking amongst blind students.
Yeah. Okay. So how was working on this project influenced your perspective on the education?
I feel that if you see one of the 17 sustainable goals of the United Nations is quality education, right? I feel that earlier, so since my freshman year, I was focusing on quality education, and one of the aspects that I didn't quite work on was inclusive education, which is to say, I mean, education is a basic right; everybody deserves it. I think my perspective towards that changed a bit because earlier I was more or less focusing on the quality of the education, not really including everyone.
Mm.
Now I'm focusing on both. Apart from quality, I'm also focusing on including everybody.
Yeah, but do you think you think the quality also is before you got in, you thought it was the quality good or bad for the blind students, or what do you
The
think?
quality for blind students, I mean, it varies greatly. For example, if you go to the Perkins Blind School, that's like the best that's like the best school for blind students. Over there, the quality is fantastic.
Mm.
However, let's say if you go to local NGOs, from my personal experience, the quality can, I mean, we can drastically improve the quality. So I think it varies greatly. However, our work has also been quite a lot on quality as well. Essentially, because most of the NGOs in schools, I personally don't think that quality education is being provided to students. That's not their fault because that's essentially because of inadequate resources, inadequate teachers, and I mean, essentially, I mean the lack of resources. That's the problem.
Um, but you think you can give those resources, or you think you're giving now the right resources to the students?
Yes. So, I mean, what we are doing is, so if you see, if a blind student wants to go home and revise math, they need somebody, right? They're dependent either on their family to essentially read out the textbooks. Because if you see the amount of textbooks in Braille that are available, they are less than 1%. In India, at least the blind centers that I have visited, I haven't seen a single textbook that was there in Braille. Therefore, they're dependent on somebody. Moreover, what we have done is we have created recordings and we have uploaded those on our website. So anybody from across the world, if they want to essentially, let's say, study a math chapter, they can just start the recording and they can listen to it. That's essentially what we are doing. We are currently expanding on making it available in different languages as well.
Um, so I have a question. So what skills have you developed through this project, and how do you think they benefit your life?
One skill that I certainly have developed is social media. So earlier, I was of the opinion that if you want to work on any initiative, you should work on the ground level and you should focus on social media later on, right? However, through this initiative, I've realized that both of those things go hand in hand, and that essentially means you need another separate team for the social media channel because you essentially can't do everything. That's certainly a life skill that I've learned. and something that has changed my opinion, which I think I'm going to have lifelong with me.
Um, a bit of a personal question. Can you share a memorable experience that you had?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as I mentioned about the blind math circle, so I mean, recently, of course, so we are an organization that is run by high school students. uh, Being blunt about it, to essentially organize a blind math circle, we need a lot of participants. For that, we need support, right? So, one of the memorable experiences was pitching this initiative to government organizations and
Mhm.
then ultimately getting them interested. And currently, we are working with them as well as other established organizations to organize the blind math circle, most probably in August.
You mentioned about doing different languages. So, do you have any expansion plans for your project?
Yes. So I mean, what we're basically doing, because essentially I reside in India, we can't essentially reach every place on Earth, right, by ourselves.
Yeah.
Moreover, what we are doing is we are disseminating information about our initiative, and we are encouraging people to start chapters of our organization in their community. So, for example, if a person in Portugal wants to start a chapter, they could reach out to us. We'll guide them, we'll provide them with the resources, and then they'll create a chapter of mathematics envisioned in their community.
So I was talking about the future, but I'm going to talk about the past a bit. So looking back, like, there's anything you would have changed when you started your project, or you just will keep it as you are?
Yes, certainly. Two things. So first of all, because I mean, I wasn't really aware about how blind students, how visually impaired students, how do they study math. So I had to do a lot of research, right? I think my research would have been aided more and would have taken certainly less time if I would have gone out more, interacted with blind students more, and
Mhm.
at an earlier stage rather than sitting with my computer and researching. Another thing that I feel, so I kind of started this project independently, and I had people in my organization at a relatively later stage, right? I think that some of those people, if I would have had them with me from the very start, for example, our COO or our director of art, I think if I would have had them earlier, we would have done wonders till now. Because essentially, they are great teammates. Because of them, mathematics and vision has reached a certain level. So I think just getting them earlier would have been great. But still, I'm really grateful that I have them in my organization.
No, yeah, I feel like it's one thing, like, researching about it, and another thing is like being there, like seeing how
Yeah.
like the process.
Hmm.
It's very different, um and yeah, that's good that you reflected about it. So how do you measure the success and the impact of a project?
So for different initiatives, so as I mentioned, there are three initiatives, right? For different initiatives, it's different. For the first one, so for the recordings that we are creating and uploading it on our website, it's majorly from how many people are able to access it, right? Which is to say, how many blind students are benefiting from it. When
Yeah.
it comes to the second initiative, the art initiative, it's more about how many shapes are we creating and how many shapes are we able to circulate, right? Essentially because the quality is now good. So that's essentially, I mean, the number is more of a criteria. The third, the AI chatbot. So we have developed our first prototype. We are working on it. We're improving it. But currently, it's more about how much help, how much independent could we make blind students? So let's say if I am a blind student, with that AI chatbot, do I need anybody else to assist me? That's one of the things that I'm measuring the impact of mathematics in vision when it comes to the AI chatbot.
For you, what was the most rewarding aspect of your project?
I think the most rewarding aspect was certainly working with my team, because I think I learned a lot from them. Apart from that, working with blind students on the ground. So, which is to say, there's one thing when as you mentioned, there's one thing when you're researching about blind students, and there's one thing when you're interacting with them. I feel that I've learned a lot just by interacting with them. For example, many people assume that disabled people, they are essentially, I mean, they don't have the required skills. However, this is quite an unknown fact, but this is something that I've noticed, at least in the blind centers that I have visited. Blind students, they are much better at mental calculations compared to us, and their ability to grasp, it's essentially more, right? Because if they need to listen to a lecture once and they'll grasp it, their mental calculations is just something that I think that they're naturally gifted with or they develop over time. But
Mm,
yeah, I mean, so I feel that's something that I have learned, which is to say that that having an impairment doesn't necessarily mean uh having a skill issue, because
yeah.
essentially they're better at mental calculations than us, and it is quite evident.
And I think they also feel like appreciated, right? Like because you're
Yeah,
doing this project for them, and like it's nice.
yeah, so I mean the happiness that's there on their faces, I mean ultimately that's the reward. So I mean, as you mentioned about the impact, so ultimately the reason why we are putting in so much effort is the happiness, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if they are happy, then we are yielding something out of it.
And this is a more question for me. So as you know, I'm gonna start IB next year, and also you. And how are you gonna plan to balance the IB with your extracurricular activities?
So the thing is, I've already commenced IB. I'm an IBDP senior, so I'm in the last
Oh,
year of the IBDP curriculum. I feel that I am able to manage it essentially because of my interest. I like to study. I mean, I love math. Physics, chemistry is sometimes bit of a trouble, but essentially, I feel that when it comes to studying, if you pay attention in class, you don't really need to devote a lot of time at home. And when it comes to submissions, I just feel that optimizing your time, even in schools, which is to say, when you have free periods, doing the work and delegating work at the same time, that's essentially how you manage things.
yeah. Um, and since you're in your senior year, what are your plans for university, and how you will continue the project after you leave high school?
Okay, so my plans for university, I plan to major in math. I'm not quite sure if I'll major in applied math with econ or applied math with physics, or who knows, I might. I mean, I'm damn sure I'll pick a few electives from pure math as well. So yeah, I'll explore when I go to the university that what kind of math do I want to study. But that's for sure, I'm going to study math. And after I graduate from high school, I'll be the one leading the project, but I'm certainly going to have another person who uh, who will be in high school leading the project along with me. Because I think when I'll be in university, the amount of time that I would be able to devote would be relatively less, and I would need another person who would be able to manage the groundwork, especially. So yeah, it would be me with another person.
And do you think that obviously you're gonna go for pitching, but it's gonna be harder for you, right? So because you're like the boss, and like you're gonna have a second boss, so if you think it's gonna be harder or easier for you?
I think it will be easier for me essentially because okay, one thing that I've realized is that essentially the posts that are given to people, I mean, at least in mathematics and vision, all the posts that are given to people, I mean, for example, if somebody is a director of art, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll only be working on the art initiative. Everybody is doing everything, right? That's essentially what I love about my team. And I feel that when another person, which is to say when another person is going to lead it along with me, I feel that that would make my job relatively easier. And I feel it's going to be the same thing that every person who joins mathematics and vision, no matter what their role is, they'll be contributing in every way possible.
And coming back to the university, do you have any place you want to go, or you just want to go study math anywhere?
So I mean, of course, everybody has dream universities. So I'll be applying to both India as well as abroad. I'm not quite sure about what exact places would I be applying. I'm yet to figure that out. But I'm looking at some of the most prestigious institutes specifically for math, and not for engineering for sure.
Look, thank you so much for this wonderful talk. And to wrap up our conversation, what advice would you give other students who are passionate about starting their own initiatives?
Okay, so I feel that first of all, you need to come up with a problem. There needs to be a problem. I've seen many kids creating problems themselves and then solving it. That's not something that you should do, but rather you need to find a problem in the society. Before commencing an initiative, you need to figure out how big is that problem or how vulnerable are the people who are being targeted by that problem. After you have done that, I feel that you need to come up with an approach of your own to solve that problem.
Yeah.
For example, for me, for mathematics and vision, it was a multidisciplinary approach, which is to say, these three initiatives together, through these three initiatives, we are uplifting blind students in math. That's something that high school students, I think, need to focus on. And then after that, you need to think about how do you plan to implement that. So, I mean, I remember, so I've interacted with quite a few entrepreneurs and I've learned one thing. Everybody has an idea, but it depends, but the value of that idea is determined by how you implement it. So i
Yeah.
so i believe that implementation is the most important part. Let's say, for example, if they do not know coding and if they think that they need a CS guy, they need to get somebody. And essentially, I mean, one of the key advice that I would like to give them is that whoever is there in your team, make sure that you trust them, because there are going to be times when you are not going to be there, when you'll not be available. So you need to trust your team enough so that they can run the organization.
Yeah. Look, thank you so much for coming, especially on a Sunday. And do you have any final words?
Not per se. I mean, yeah, just one last thing. In case if you want to join Mathematics Envision, I would love I would love that, because we'd be able to essentially create greater impact. And if anybody wants to contact me about it, feel free to do it on LinkedIn or on Discord. I'll send you my Discord ID, and you could probably post that on on your podcast as well. And yeah, just one last thing. If you are a high school student and if you want to start an initiative, don't stress out a lot. Just start and it'll all work out at the end.
Okay. So, guys, thank you all for watching. Follow Teen Talks and also Mathematics and Vision on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram. And see you next time, guys. Bye bye.
Bye, Miguel. Bye.